Hello. I think we're all here and we can make a start if that's okay.
Yeah.
So we'll make a start. We'll do as we did before and just go around the table so that everybody knows everybody else. So Jennifer, do you want to start?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Malinowski. I'm the County Councillor for Burwell and Fordham.
Hello everyone, and I'm Councillor Anna Bradnam and I'm the member for Waterbeach Division.
Good afternoon everybody. I'm Chris Poulton, Councillor for Papworth and Swavesey.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm David Levine of Trumpington Division.
Hi everyone, I am Tom Hawke Dawson, Councillor for Soham South and Haddenham Division.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Sarah Kane and I'm the County Councillor for St Neots East and the Grandstands.
Hello, Sally Cartwright, Director of Public Health.
Hi everyone, Patrick Warren Higgs, I'm the Exec Director for Adults Health and Commissioning.
And Graham Wilson, I'm Chair of this committee and County Councillor for Godminster and Huntingdon South.
Hello, Luis Navarro, Vice Chair of the committee and Councillor for Northstowe, Longstanton.
Good afternoon, I'm Nick Mills, providing Democratic Services support in place of Rashenda.
Hi, I'm David Keane, I'm representing Fenstanton and the Hemmingfords.
Hello, Steve Tierney, Wisbech West. Thank you.
Afternoon, James Sidlow, Ramsey and Berry.
Hello, I'm Mike Black, County Councillor for Arbury. I'm substituting for Richard Howard today.
I'm Darren Green, representing Romsey in Cambridge.
Julie Kerr, representing St Ives and North and Whitton.
Thank you, everybody. Those people who are subbing, do you want to just put your hands up just so that we are clear who is subbing for whom? Thank you. Just so that you know. Right, thank you very much. So welcome to this special meeting of the Adults and Health Committee on Thursday, the 3rd of July. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. Can I ask everyone to turn their phones to silent or vibrate though, please? This meeting will be live streamed and a recording will be available to view later on the County Council's website. Committee members, to register your wish to speak, please raise your hand and I or Lewis will make a note. In accordance with the Constitution, I will briefly adjourn the meeting for a comfort break if it lasts more than 2 hours. There's no fire alarm test today, so if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting and will leave via the side doors and use the fire escape next to the kitchen to make our way to the assembly point in the car park. Item 1 is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Will the Deputy Democratic Services Manager let us know of any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. There are apologies from Councillor Howitt, with Councillor Black here as a substitute, from Councillor Nethsinger, with Councillor Poulton substituting, and from Councillor Whelan, with Councillor Bradnam substituting.
Thank you. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? The only one from me is my wife is registered shown on my register of interest as receiving an NHS pension. The reason for that is that she used to be a health visitor, and health visiting is included in the performance measures later on. So I just thought those of you who don't know that might like to know. David.
Well, my wife is a healthcare assistant. I don't know whether that is a declarable interest, but I'll try. And tell me if I don't ever need to say that again, please, Chair.
Right, well, we've noted it, and I wasn't proposing to say it again, so I think that's okay. Thank you very much. Can I just clarify at this point that we don't have the minutes of the previous meeting on the agenda because this is a special meeting. So the draft of the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of June, as well as today's meeting, will be on the agenda at the next committee meeting. Item 3 is about the future of place-based commissioning in adult social care. The report will be introduced by Shona Torrance, Head of Adult Social Care Commissioning, and Joanne Melvin, Strategic Lead for Place-Based Commissioning. Sorry, go on, Darren.
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder if you could say a few words about why this is a special meeting. I'm new to all this, so I'm not aware why this isn't a normal committee meeting. And we also didn't have any spokes meeting for this meeting, which seems a little bit strange because there's some quite big key decisions to be discussed.
The reason it's a special meeting is that we couldn't fit everything in the first meeting, that as it was, the first meeting ran from 10 till 1, and there are some quite important decisions that need to be sorted out before the next scheduled meeting, which is in October, unless we use the reserve date in September. We did have a spokes meeting fairly recently, but I agree we rather ran out of time to go through all the papers for today. So that's the reason. Certainly, the spokes meeting is intended to ensure that there are no surprises. So if you feel when we get to items you are surprised, then just say. Does that clarify things?
It does, thank you. And yes, I was surprised going through the agenda, so I may be surprised again during the meeting.
All right. Shona, how are you feeling? Do you want to start and then pass across fairly quickly?
Yes, thank you. You can hear me. This strategic paper being presented today aims to provide the committee with an insight and overview into the work which has been undertaken over the last 3.5 years to develop a more place-based approach to the way we as a council develop and commission services to support people. There is a lot of content here, so Joe and I will be jointly presenting the report, and I think Sally wants to come in from a public health perspective at the end. In 2022, the council took the decision to invest 2.9 million in Care Together, a 4-year programme to support older people to remain living independently for longer. The programme championed a preventative and place-based approach to building resilience and increasing assets and services within local communities through working directly with voluntary sector providers. It sought to identify common goals and work in greater partnership with other council departments such as communities and public health, as well as other partner organisations, including district and parish councils and our health partners. And finally, it sought to improve the use of true co-production with people accessing services and their local communities in developing and commissioning provision to support their needs. The work undertaken supports the current model for adult social care, which seeks to prioritise prevention, early intervention and independence for people. The approach not only recognises the positive impact building our preventative offer can have on people, their unpaid carers and their local communities, but also enables the council to more effectively manage demand as demand for these services continue to rise. Implementing place-based approaches to commissioning as part of business as usual will enable us to expand the use and therefore the benefits of this preventative offer. Whilst the connection between prevention, reducing demand and associated pounds saved is not always an easy one to make at a person-by-person level, there is no doubt that the approach to date has already played a part in reducing the number of people being placed in long-term care, where Cambridgeshire perform really well in comparison to other councils. In support of this, there has also been national research that suggests that preventative services could save £3 for every £1 spent, depending on the service area.
Thanks. Can everybody hear me okay? Brilliant, thank you. So there's a lot of information in the report about the impact of Care Together. And what I'd like to do now is just to focus on some of those key achievements and what this has meant for local people and for Cambridgeshire. As Shauna mentioned, one of the key aims of Care Together has been to strengthen our prevention offer in order to help keep people independent for longer. One of the main ways that we've done that through Care Together has been in the investment of £850,000 of seed funding to date to help grassroots, voluntary and community groups offer new or more activities which help older people keep physically active and stay socially connected in their communities. These are two things that are some of the most important ways to age well, and that is supported by our public health evidence. Through the seed funding, we've commissioned a wide range of activities in local communities, including things from walking football, new age curling, lunch clubs, mobile gym sessions for older adults, good neighbour schemes, knit and natter groups, and community accessible transport. It's been a really varied range of seed funding that have been co-developed with local people in the community. And as a result of that, we've been able to invest in more grassroots level, local and voluntary community organisations than we've ever done before in support of the preventative agenda around older adults. The impact of that has meant that we have been over 6,300 older adults have benefited from the seed funding to date. And they tell us that they feel less lonely and less isolated. And for some of those individuals, it may be the only opportunity that they get to leave their house or mix with other people. For others, it's given them the confidence to try something new or to become physically active in a way that they didn't think was possible. And there are a couple of case studies in Appendix 2 that will illustrate this for you. Care Together, as Shauna mentioned, has also adopted a place-based approach to commissioning. And what this really means is involving local people and local partners in designing services that are relevant to their particular community. We did this when transforming our Older People's Day opportunities. And together with both local partners and older adults in each district, we co-produced a new set of place-based grants, which led to a very diverse and vibrant offer for day opportunities. And as a result, we've managed to triple the number of older adults engaging with that offer for the same expenditure or budget level. Another success has been the introduction of Care Micro Enterprises to Cambridgeshire. To date, we have introduced more than 67, and we're still counting. And that's attracted over 120 new people to come and work in the care workforce within Cambridgeshire. Care Micro Enterprises, or CMEs, as you'll see them referred to in the report, are self-employed care workers or very, very small care businesses with less than 9 members of staff, and they provide care and support in the local community. They can offer practical support with things like shopping, laundry, gardening, but some of them also offer personal care. There's a case study in paragraph 3.3.4, which helps to show how valuable this support can be to help an older adult remain living independently at home. In summary, Care Together has demonstrated a positive impact both on individuals, the council and the wider community. By the end of March 2026, we estimate that the programme will have delivered £9 million in wider social value through investment in the third sector, job creation, and increases and improvements in community health and resilience.
As the funding for Care Together in its current form comes to an end in March 26, we are seeking to embed the approaches we've used in Care Together as part of our business as usual adults health and commissioning strategy, which centres on prevention and early help. By making it business as usual, we hope that we can permanently progress the good impact that we've achieved to date and also expand it out to the whole of adult social care, regardless of age or need. To do this, we will need to reshape the commissioning service to enable this to happen over the next year, ensuring that any place-based structures are underpinned and supported by the provision of seed funding, which will be match funded by Public Health in a move to closer align services, both in terms of approach and how we measure impact. Finally, the reorganisation will enable us to create a more sustainable growth of community sector organisations through continued efforts to measure impact and support small organisations to become self-sustainable wherever possible. It will allow us to continue to improve the use of co-production and continue to work with our communities and partner organisations, as well as actively contribute and drive a one council approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean and Joe. Sally's going to add some comments.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a few words from a public health perspective. So this, although led from the Adults Commissioning team, this has been really supported by public health, and the approach is really in line with public health principles around focusing on prevention, keeping care closer to the community, and really thinking about population needs through the work. And I think it's really aligned as well with what's coming out, the national policy missions around care closer to home and keeping people out of hospital, and will be kind of even strengthened further from the 10-year plan that's come out today in terms of how it all fits together around neighbourhood working. So I think we're in a really strong position that we've got this approach. In the setup of it, it's been a real collaboration with public health involved in helping think about what the evidence base shows around where we need to focus. So what the evidence base shows helps with prevention in this space. So thinking about making sure we're concentrating on physical activity, social isolation, thinking about the approach that's been used, building in that public health approach. And so as part of that, going forward, we've committed to put in some more public health funding into this approach. So thinking about some of the seed funding, but making sure it's really aligned to our behaviour change services that we will be commissioning in October, and making sure that the two are aligned, because there's lots of synergies that we can really make sure that we are building on, and I think it will really strengthen both services to be really working collaboratively together. And then the last thing I just wanted to say was it recognised that this type of intervention is quite difficult to get a really robust evaluation on. You know, it's quite small, discrete, individual, innovative pieces of work at local level, and to say what's actually been avoided or what's actually been prevented through that without a comparator is quite difficult. But we are committed to putting in some additional public health resource to look at that better going forward, to think when we're committing some seed funding, some pilots, some projects, what are the evaluation measures early on, and really thinking about that more strongly going forward. So we've committed some public health reserves into doing that in a really robust way, with it potentially with an academic partner or with a commissioned organisation to help us think that through better. And then we could also get some better evidence on return on investment and savings from that as well, hopefully. So just wanted to recognise that from a public health perspective, I'm really supportive of this approach.
Okay, thank you. Before I open it up to questions or comments from the committee, can I just ask Patrick, the NHS plan for the next 10 years was published today by the government, and I'd be interested to know how that affects this and whether there are any other implications that we should be aware of before we move forward.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And Sally's touched on some of this because it's just been published today, so we're busy trying to read the extensive document, but we've kind of thought to pull out some of the key messages that I think are there. And there are some changes that we will see within our kind of governance and arrangements. Things around integrated care partnerships are proposed to be abolished, Health Watch, and that some of the social care functions may well transfer into the local authorities. And there'll be some changes, I think, around the ICBs, which you'll be aware of as they're now discussing their significant financial challenges and the way that they will structure themselves in the future. I suppose in terms of this particular paper, it's around intermediate care and the way integration into neighbourhood health services are being developed. And so it'll be really helpful once we start to understand the work that we're doing there, the work that we're already on within the integrated care system of neighbourhood health models, and how we can align these two together so that it's a joined up of thinking, as Sally touched on, around different parts of our services, not just within the council, but in our broader system, and of how we use those and the the 10-year plan is certainly setting out from the NHS perspective about how they want to see that move from acute care into community care and wrap it around services such as this, and the principles that have come out of the Care Together programme of how we look at all commissioning for all ages on that preventative model is certainly something that we want to build on, and the paper reflects that.
Okay, thank you. So any comments, questions for any of the officers? Anna?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report and for the extra information that Sally Cartwright gave us, because one of the things I was going to ask was, do we have any evidence of the outcomes? And Sally has talked about the fact that it's hard to get an evaluation from this kind of intervention because you haven't got a comparator to say what would happen if you hadn't done it. So I absolutely agree with the fact that some money is being committed in order to guarantee some evidential basis that this is helping. So that's great. One of the things I'm concerned about, and I would like to ask Sally if there's any way of protecting against the risks of when services are delegated to communities, what do we do any monitoring of how those communities are being supported and how successful they are in making sure that those services are continuous, as they would be if they'd been provided by a funded service? You know, as they go into community, are we relying on volunteers more who might have to drop out and that sort of thing? It's that sort of monitoring of how is that service working in the community when it's not being driven by when it's a more voluntary thing. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Joanne, people are pointing at you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really valid question. Just to provide some reassurance, within the model of Care Together, we had a number of place-based commissioners who, as part of their role, was the monitoring of some of these seed funding grants, so that we can both measure some of the impact and collect some of the evidence, but also to assure of delivery amongst those services. So, and I think it's just really important to note, in terms of the overwhelming majority of the services that we're talking about in the preventative space, they're not delivering regulated activity or statutory care that we would typically monitor in terms of, for example, providing domiciliary care.
Other questions while you're thinking? What's the cost of this if we do roll it out to other adult social care parts of the business and put it into business as usual, as opposed to the continuation of the seed funding that you're doing at the moment?
So we are working through plans at the moment, and our focus is trying to maintain the impacts we've achieved to date, whilst balancing that against a particularly challenging financial position. So as far as possible, we're going to try and move back to our business as usual budget, although there will be some requirement for ongoing seed funding to support that model moving forward.
Okay, I'm just a bit concerned if we do agree to the recommendation about support the proposed next steps to embed a place-based approach to commissioning adult social care services in Cambridgeshire without knowing what the implications for costs might be. But are you, Patrick?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to echo Shauna's point, the plan is that we will work within our existing window envelope of the budget that's available in the current budget, and we will accommodate the new changes and the learning from Care Together, because Care Together, the funding ends at the end of March 26. So as part of our plans for into 26-27 will be a review and look at our structural arrangements for delivery of place-based commissioning, and anything around seed funding will be within the existing budget envelope that we have. There won't be an additional ask through the business planning process for any further funds, we will look for funding that from within our existing budget envelope.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Sorry, Darren and then Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I'm the owner and operator of a micro business, and it's really, really great. I'd love to just reiterate the support for this. As a small business, you rarely get a chance to have a council contract, so it's fantastic that we're offering this to micro businesses involved in care. It's been mentioned the risks that some of these services might just disappear. As a small business, yeah, you're probably 1 or 2 crises away from completely falling over. So I think that needs to be borne in mind, but I think the emphasis should be on providing support for the businesses and just, if that happens, having some mitigation in place. But again, I'm not suggesting this is a reason for not going ahead with this project. I'm just saying it's something that needs to be considered. And from the other side, as a micro business or a sole trader, there's very little excess capacity. So I'm just a little bit worried about a tiny business coming up against the council and having maybe lots of administrative or reporting burdens put on top of them. There's already been requests for sort of feedback and measurements. I don't think these businesses are going to have the capacity to do very much in terms of reporting, and I'd just like to emphasize again that that can be something that will just topple the businesses over if you impose this burden on them. But again, yes, really happy to see this. It's a wonderful innovation.
Thank you. So Tom, your comment, and then if you care to sum up, Shauna.
Thank you, Chair. So my question is about the KPIs. It's great to see so much green, I have to say. So going forwards, though, how are these targets set? How are they reviewed? Will there be a review? It seems a shame to just kind of settle as we are if things are going so well. Are we able to put some additional stretch targets in there?
Absolutely. So when we first started the programme, the targets were aspirational, and during the programme we overachieved on those targets. So we have, every time we've got to that point, we have stretched whilst looking at what we can feasibly do and working with those local providers to look at how we stretch. So yes, they will continue to be monitored within the future arrangements as we roll this out, and yes, we will continue to stretch, but I think there will need to be a sense check with our local BCSE and provider services to sense check that we're not stretching it too far and that it's reasonable and achievable.
Okay, and you hear what Darren says about reporting and not making things too onerous.
Yes, so
bureaucracy.
the place-based commissioners have worked in really close partnership. We haven't commissioned in the traditional sense. There's not been lots of paperwork, and then you have to fill it. They work with those local providers and agree how will evidence impact, how they'll monitor. They do a lot of the work with them behind the scenes. So yeah, we try to make it as proportionate as possible whilst needing to evidence so that we can continue the approach we've been taking.
Thank you. Lewis.
More of a curious question. When I read the last of the principles in practice, which is innovation, and probably more for you, Sally, is encourage creativity by not specifying services and encouraging people and providers to come up with ideas to meet outcomes. Is this more based on kind of the human learning systems and how to create outcome, a new kind of management framing, less bureaucracy, more community-based, small projects, the small business creation? Is this trying to be based on these human learning systems, or this is something that we are aspiring to, or is this is not something that is being done based on that?
I will defer to colleagues, but my impression is it is based on that kind of principle without being explicit that it's going into that kind of framework. But those kinds of principles as part of that way of working are definitely embedded into it. We haven't ever explicitly said it's about that human learning element, but it definitely is very similar. I don't know if you guys want to come in at all.
I would echo exactly what you've just said there, Sally. In the beginning, the concept of care together was born out of observing the real impact that we saw from community and voluntary organisations, and that real capacity and momentum that can be harnessed in support of community resilience. And very much at the heart of Care Together is about trying to tap into that and support growth of that, and at the same time very much the co-production ethos about rather than the council, if you like, sitting in an ivory tower deciding what services should be for people's best needs. It's actually that we do that with local people as equal co-commissioners, and actually some of the things that have come out of things like the seed funding and the older adult social inclusion grants are things that I would never have necessarily thought of as a council officer sat here, but by going and engaging and visiting golden age fairs, community coffee mornings, and working with older adults, they told us what they needed in their local community, and that's very much kind of the ethos around where Care Together's come from.
Patrick.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So it's an excellent point by Joe, just to echo that the whole of adult social care is focused on co-production and strength-based, which is about what the person can do and giving the person support to do what they can do, not for us to tell them what we think is in their best interest. And it's about engagement, and it's about the richness that individuals and their communities bring to help us. So those innovative ideas are often start off in the form of a seed that then grows and develops, and then those smaller businesses can grow as a result of that in response to what people are wanting and needing. And we've seen a huge growth in some of these localities when these ideas have started as a small project and then they've just been bought on by local communities. And that's something within our practice that we do every day, not just within the Care Together programme, but right across the service where we'll do that. And as Sally says, it happens as part of human learning. I don't know whether it explicitly is that, but it's how we bring that. And then often when you get in a group, an idea will start and others will then contribute to it. So together that idea then develops into a programme and a project.
All right, thank you very much. And so let's move to the report recommendations. The committee is being asked to scrutinise the report and note the impact of the Care Together programme, which we've done, and support the proposed next steps to embed a place-based approach to commissioning adult social care services in Cambridgeshire. I've heard no objections to that, so I'll take these recommendations as agreed unanimously unless anyone expresses a view to the contrary. No, so we'll supported that and move on to item 4. Thank you, Joe. So item 4 is an adult social care accommodation update and care home block grant extension. Shauna stays with us to introduce this report and is joined by Lisa Sparks, Senior Commissioning Manager. Shauna.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just give a brief overview of the report. As you've heard in the previous agenda item, adult social care is focused on prevention and targeted early intervention to support people to remain within their own homes wherever we can. However, this is not always possible, and in meeting our duties under the Care Act, it is critical that the Council has access to a good range of accommodation-based services, including care homes with access to 24-hour residential and nursing care needs for those with more complex needs. As these services are supporting people with the most complex needs, it is important that they are of good quality and spread across the county to ensure people retain as much connection as possible to their local networks and families. In December, we presented a paper to committee which set out how we intend to identify and address the shortfalls in capacity, and an update on these actions has been included in paragraph 3.3 of the report. I am pleased to say that we are not projecting a shortfall of care home capacity, as our current and new pipeline demand we believe will continue to meet the projected demand. Today, we are seeking committee's approval to extend the current block contract arrangement with a reduced number of beds to ensure we are able to drive best value for money and continue to meet demand for this type of service. As set out in paragraph 3.5, this long-term block contract was put in place 5 years ago within the context of a destabilising effect of the pandemic, rising spot contracting prices and a lack of access to a range of capacity, preventing the council from giving people maximum choice and control. This approach, the block contract, has enabled the council to offer the market some stability whilst also managing down those escalating costs. By offering local providers a range of contract terms, we were able to increase the number of providers we commissioned with, giving people more equity and access to care home support, despite some unexpected closures which have happened in the meantime. Quality expectations were and continue to be high, resulting in over 99% of our block care home capacity being rated good or above by the Care Quality Commission, and feedback from people accessing those services is largely positive. As part of the contract extension period, we are looking to make a number of improvements, the first of which forms part of the recommendations today. By decommissioning a number of the current block beds as set out in paragraph 4.14 of the report, we will enable the council to maintain a utilisation rate of 92%, which reduces the cost of vacant, unused beds and drives up value for money. These beds have been underutilised and will not result in a shortfall of capacity within this area. We are also continuing to work with the local market to shape and develop ongoing capacity to ensure we can continue to meet the growing demand in this area and expand the use of extra care housing as a preventative alternative to care homes. Finally, we are working with property services and capital asset teams within the council to progress a programme focused on capital development to meet demand within this and other accommodation-based service areas. This will include a review of our independent living services as a potential future model to meet the needs of people with 24-hour care needs, and a further report will be brought to committee on this later this year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, councillors, any comments, questions? Oh, lots. David.
So if I understand this correctly, we're reducing our capacity by about 8%.
I don't have the exact figure to hand.
We're having less beds than we had before.
Yes, in the block contract. So we are reducing the vacant capacity so that we can drive up utilisation and ensure we're getting maximum value for money out of that block contract.
I'm just a bit confused in the fact that I thought we had an ageing population where we're getting more people with these kind of issues, and we seem to be reducing our capacity at the time.
So we're reducing our block capacity. We are able to spot, so we're able to purchase individual placements over and above our block contract. The difference between the block and spot is that we need to pay for those beds. The block beds we need to pay for even when they're vacant. The spot beds we pay for as and when we use. And so when that bed becomes vacant, we no longer pay for it. It's really important that we maintain an optimum balance between that block and spot to achieve value for money. So we're not reducing capacity within the market. We are reducing our block commitment within care homes to ensure we can achieve best value.
Do you follow that?
I'm sorry, the question that then comes after that is, obviously, if you buy in bulk and you buy in advance, you get cheaper prices. If you buy on spot, you get more expensive prices. So are we going to be suddenly presented with oh, sorry, we misjudged the number and now we've got to pay for a lot of beds we didn't have?
No, so we monitor the spot pricing. So we monitor both our block utilisation and the pricing of our spot contracts across the county on a monthly basis. So if we start to see an increase in that spot rise, we can take really proactive action to mitigate against that. But at the moment, this ratio, we believe, will hold a balance that will offer the council best value.
Do we just let Patrick help us out here?
The underlying factor that we have to consider here is an adult's choice. And so whilst we can try and get a balanced market between a spot and block arrangement, because of the nature of it, as you say, is often cheaper, but the spot arrangements can be more in the open market, can cost more. When we're working with an individual and around their choice of where they want to live, as that's their home, we then have to balance that. So it's a difficult process that we go through around our future demands and our current demands and the way that people choose. But our evidence is that the current block arrangements are not being maximised in terms of the utilisation, and therefore the proposal is that we extend some of these contracts which are being used, but some contracts where the voids is too great, and therefore it's a cost to the council on top of all the other costs that we've got around the spot and block arrangements, that we're proposing that we reduce the block provision, but we maintain the capacity in the market and our continued meeting demand within our existing budget. But the budget is an extremely challenging one because of the nature of we're working with people, and so people choose to go into different places, and some of our demographics change, but we're watching that all the time. Every month we look at all of the activity, all the volume of our work and the use of our money.
Now, I have lots of other people who also want to ask questions. Does anybody's question directly relate to this? Right. So Anna and Chris, and then we'll start on a different question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my question is related to this. The point about a block contract is that it gives us the security of knowing we've got those places, and indirectly, it also gives those care homes the security of knowing that those places are being contracted. And some of those places are in quite small care homes. 34% on page 30 of our block contracts are for the very particular needs of residential dementia care homes. And I'm just concerned that I don't object to this because I think it makes sense. We don't want to purchase beds that we don't need. But what I want to be sure about is, have we done any analysis that if we take away our block contract, will some of those smaller, very specific care homes that provide dementia residential, will they be able to provide us the spot beds when we need them because they might have gone bust or something? Have we done an analysis of that?
Okay, let's get Chris's question on this, and then we'll get both those, and Steve, and then we'll get all these answers together.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it was a question about your forecast of demand over this 5-year period. We understand that you're cutting the block beds, and somebody said 8%. I don't know if that is the right figure, but compared to that, what sort of forecast do you have for the next period, given that we have a aging population?
Okay, and then Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit concerned by some of what I'm hearing, perhaps for no reason, but just to explain why. It seems to me that if you've got block beds, I can see it costs more money because we're holding beds that sometimes we don't use, but that does mean we've got a kind of a safety valve if something surprising happens. So, for instance, if a care home were to suddenly close, you've got beds available to put people in. Now, the spot method probably also works, but they won't definitely be there. It's got to be changing all the time, I would imagine, because you haven't purchased them in advance. So what beds are available is surely going to change regularly depending on the providers and what they've got available. It just worries me that two things worry me. First, it worries me that if something surprising happens, we won't have a backup to cover us. And the second thing that worries me is that the additional cost and effort involved in finding a spot placing might create a pressure to not place people in the appropriate situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Lewis.
Yeah, perhaps a bit more explanation on the balance that is very difficult to strike, sudden pressures that may arise from unexpected events. But I guess just to understand, if we can give more have more information about the void cost, is £42,000 a week. So perhaps we can have a little more information, and also how the price of a spot and blocked has closed down since the pandemic ended. So maybe that information will inform the table a little more of why is a balance important to strike.
Okay, thank you. Go on. I hope somebody's making a note of all these comments. Hang on a minute, Sean.
Well, I mean, it has two parts. So the first part was exactly the question that Councillor Keane answered. So I think that's been thoroughly well answered. My second one, just tiny little point. I couldn't help noticing that there are no nursing dementia beds at all in East Cambs, and there are a huge number in the city. What happens to people who need nursing dementia care in East Cambs? Are they shipped over to the city? Are people being driven around the place? I'm just a little bit curious about that number. It's on page 33 of the report on the table. Thanks.
Sean or somebody, do you want to pick up all of those different points?
Yeah, I'll have a go, and then do shout if I've forgotten one. So just to start on the sustainability of providers and any risk attached to that. So the decommissioning plans in this report won't be a surprise. The recommendations we've put forward have been as a result of really detailed contract management conversations that have happened over an extended period of time. So these aren't plans that we've developed in isolation. We've done that with those providers, and we've got assurance from our contract management team that they are aware of it, ready to enact it should we approve that decision, and there won't be a sustainability risk attached to it. Coming back to, Patrick.
Well, I thought I could just step in and just help out, Sean, while you
Thank you.
gather your throat to take some rest, just in terms of the risks that Councillor Tierney said. So we purchase about 30 to 35% of the market that's available across the county. So that's all that the council buys. Other beds are bought by private individuals or other councils buying. At the moment, there is sufficient capacity in the market across the county, and there are new homes. And as Shona said in the paper, it talks about the pipeline capacity. So at the moment, we feel that if a provider was failing, and that's either a spot or a block arrangement, there would be capacity to support those individuals to move to an alternative provision within the county. Often when those providers close, historically, it's often in the same vicinity or locality where they happen. So the risk isn't greater whether they're in a block arrangement or a spot arrangement, because the capacity in the market exists. And our forecast and our pipeline is that the capacity will continue to be available to us, particularly around residential care going forward. There is a challenge, as councillors identified, around nursing provision in East Cambs, but in terms of residential provision, there is a sufficient capacity in the market to manage risks that may present. But at the moment, we have a very close monitoring system of both the financials, the quality, the care that's provided in all our homes where we have people placed, and where we don't have people placed. We have a responsibility. I have a responsibility as the DAS to make sure that the provision is sustainable right across the county. So we continually monitor the provision to make sure that we've got a good oversight of their financials and their regulatory, working closely with CQC. So I'm confident that we've got sufficient capacity at the moment and in the pipeline to manage any changes of the provision, whether that be through spot or block arrangements.
Shauna, do you want to continue?
Yeah, just coming to the East Cambs question. So whilst we don't have a block in East Cambs at the moment, we do access capacity via spot contract arrangements. We also have some early developments in the pipeline at the moment, so there could be potential to address that. It's something that we've been actively working with over the last few years, but there is capacity. It's just we haven't been able to block contract that capacity.
And Lewis's comment about the void costs, is there anything more that we can add about that?
So the void costs are based on the cost of vacancies of those beds. We need to again, as Patrick has said, it's a really complex process, but we need to make sure that cost remains at a certain level so that it offers the council value for money against the price of a spot potentially. Hence us reducing the number of the block, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
I can see this.
I think the answer is that he's happy with that. Julie.
Thank you. I'm just noting that in Huntingdonshire, that's the most biggest drop in the block beds, and I just wanted to know the reason for it, because it has an increasing ageing population. Are those beds not being fully utilised? Is that why the drop is so great?
So, as Sean has explained, it's just the utilisation of the block beds. So we are placing still a lot of people within Huntingdonshire, and that will be based around their choice potentially as well of which homes they would like to go to and which areas. So we're not reducing the capacity at all. There's still a high demand in Huntingdonshire, but it's just those particular block beds, for whatever reason, have not been the appropriate choice or the appropriate placement for people. Hence, we've had to look at removing those from this contract at this time.
Okay, and are you signalling, Mike? Go on, Mike. Yeah, I beg your pardon. Go on, carry on.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm looking at this. I'm thinking we last approved of these contracts 5 years ago, which is when we still had a Conservative administration and before the joint authority, and we are going to approve them today, and most of them for 5 years, which will be after the next elections for this council and probably after the next parliamentary elections. And this is an immense amount of money we're talking about here, 170 million. I mean, that's equivalent to a sixth of this council's annual budget. It's a lot of money. It's not like the 1 or 2 millions that we're often talking about in these things. And I wonder if other councillors are comfortable with voting this through without knowing which companies and which care homes are going to receive this 170 million that we're voting. Now, I actually do have a list of the care homes with block beds, so I do know this, I think. I mean, it's from 2023, but it looks exactly the same number. And it's after we got rid of the disgraceful HC1 Limited care homes, which were removed from council contracts as they were doing an absolutely awful job, company registered in the Cayman Islands. We've not been told which care home is closing in Huntingdonshire. Now, I mean, my guess on this is that it's Riola in St Ives, owned by Excel Care, because they have planning permission to demolish that home and to build a bigger home in its stead, which I think would answer everybody's questions about Huntingdonshire, and if I'm right on that. And I understand those beds are already vacant, according to the paper. But I'd have thought that we should be actually told straight out that if that is what it is. There's a bit about quality here. I'd like to know how many of these homes are excellent. I think probably there's one in Royston is, but I've always been disappointed by how few of the people we contract have excellent CQC markings. And it does distress me a bit when I see homes celebrating in the media that they've got a good marking when that is the bare minimum that any home should be aiming for. And I suspect that the more predatory of the private care home business, if one of their homes was to get an excellent, they would immediately be cutting the staff and saying, well, you're spending money to get that excellent, which could be gaining profits to us. I'm told about 10 or 12 homes at any one time are on the radar of the part of our Adults and Health Council officials who try to check that everything's on track. So, although we've been told there's not many homes here that are needing improvement, as it were, at any one time there are lots of homes that there are worries about, and we're being asked to renew their contracts. There might well be good reasons why we should, but it concerns me a little bit. When I last looked, I mean, we've got 9 Excel Care homes in the county, which I think would be getting block bed contracts. St George's Court in Cambridge, when I last looked, had got an inadequate marking. Excel Care is a company registered in Jersey, not the Cayman Islands. and people tell me they're one of the better care home chains. But when you get a CQC requires improvement or inadequate in social health care, it is far, far more serious than it is in, as far as I can see, than it is in education or when it's a council department or the NHS. It involves people getting never happen things happening, such as being told that the staffing shortage in this home is so bad that at the lunchtime period when people are busy, bedpans are not brought round. People are told that they need to just go to the toilet in their beds. That is not human dignity, and that is the system that we're with. Now, I don't think we've got much alternative but to pass this. I mean, you know, what happens if we vote no to these contracts? But I want to express my lack of confidence in our social care system. It is failing, and we haven't alternatives. I've got to say, I'm going to blame Wes Streeting for this quite a lot. We should be setting out a new course with radical Labour alternatives to the dismal status quo. We've had numerous reports like the Eunice and Fabian report on the roadmap to a national care service, which has set out the way we should be going forward, and instead it's being kicked into the long grass with another inquiry, and I think that's wrong. But I am considering whether I should vote for this, because I feel I'd be making a huge decision and commitment of money, which is basically business for usual in a system that has been chronically delivering unacceptable results for our older people and our vulnerable people. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Just to clarify, the total amount that we're being asked to approve is for all contract extension periods. So if for whatever reason the contract is not extended, then it wouldn't be as much as this. It would be this is the absolute maximum. Patrick, do you want to comment before I invite Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to make it clear that because we're withdrawing the contracts, that doesn't mean the home is closing, Councillor Black. We aren't the only provider or the only buyer of beds in those provisions. That doesn't mean to say that those homes aren't closing or won't close in the future, but we aren't buying. That's our proposal, is that we're not buying beds there. Just to be clear, we're not buying 100% of the beds. We're buying a percentage of the beds there. So just to make that understood. CQC don't have a rating of excellent, so it's important that the committee understand that we have good or outstanding homes, and we have a high proportion, in fact higher than the region, in terms of the beds and care homes in Cambridgeshire that are good or outstanding. I'm concerned with the examples that you've brought out to committee today, because if you have evidence of that, you should raise that as a safeguarding. You shouldn't be reporting to committee evidence of instances of care that you're talking about there without providing it to us, because everybody's a responsibility as under safeguarding to raise those concerns. So you need to speak to me after the meeting if you've got those concerns, and tell me which care homes and where they are. If it was HC1, we've dealt with that. If it's more recent and it's more evidence, because HC1 is some time ago, you need to raise that with me, because we work hard to make sure that the care that we provide and we oversee as an adult social care function across Cambridgeshire is done to the best of our ability, and our care providers are held to account for that.
Can I just make a point of explanation on that, Chair? I'm not making any new evidence or anything that isn't in the public domain. The example I just gave is documented in a CQC report from 2023, which I believe is the latest report for that care home. So there's nothing for me to report as safeguarding. It's actually in a Care Quality Commission report. And again, yeah, I'm satisfied that the council has some of these homes on their radar and is urging them to improve. That's quite correctly what should be happening. But I just want to make the point that that's what we are approving to carry on. I will not be making any reports or safeguarding evidence, because all I'm saying is things that are in the public domain already, and as you say, with the case of HC1 has been dealt with.
Okay, thank you. I think it may be helpful if you just remind Patrick which CQC report it is that you're referring to, just so that there is no shadow of doubt about this. Steve.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'm just struggling with this one a little bit. If I can just get a little bit of clarity, because I'm torn on it, because I do believe in saving money and using taxpayers' money effectively. I believe in cutting waste where it's not being used, but I'm worried a little bit about sometimes when you take a decision, you make things worse down the line because you didn't think it through. So what I'd really like to know, and you sort of answered this question, but didn't precisely answer it. If we're going to stop block booking some beds from some organisations, what is the danger that that change will push them into going out of business? What is the danger that that is the straw that breaks the camel's back and causes a whole place to close, losing a lot more beds? Has any of that, how much have we looked into it? What's the genuine danger of that happening? Thank you.
Okay, Shauna.
I'll let Sean answer the specifics and I'll just follow up.
Perfect, thank you. So we've worked really closely with those providers where we are decommissioning beds, not the beds, a few beds within those homes, and we've worked with them really closely. So our recommendation here today is not a surprise to those providers. We've worked around the sustainability of their plans. Our contract management team know them well, have good relationships with them, and so we're not worried about the sustainability of that home should we decommission those beds.
And if we wanted to know in confidence which homes these were, we could ask and it could be provided. But for commercially sensitive reasons, it's not included in the papers.
I mean, if I could just clarify, does "we're not worried" mean we're confident that's not going to happen? Because that is still too vague for me.
Yes.
Just to say that, as I said, the work's been gone on with the homes. The homes are still operating, and if somebody wanted to live there, we would, through a spot arrangement, buy that bed. But at the moment, the demand is not there. So we either continue to keep empty beds and pay for those empty beds to the cost of the council, or on an assessment of the demand that we've got and the capacity that we've got in the rest of the market, make a proposal that we don't extend the contracts, and in engagement with those providers, we remove those. That's an option, albeit the spot arrangement continues.
Okay. Now, I did ask Patrick separately, why was the recommendation about supporting decommissioning of 45 block contracted beds coming to us when we're quite keen for officers to have delegated powers to save us money? But the answer to that is this is an awful lot of money and it shouldn't just be delegated to officers. So that's the answer to why it's coming to us. Okay, so we move into the recommendations. I hear Michael and Steve's reservation. Sorry, Anna.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that normally we would not name individual care homes in any discussions in committee unless there were particularly good reasons to do so, because it's commercially sensitive. Is that correct?
And that is correct. We would have to move into private session and then we could have an open debate amongst ourselves, not with the live stream on.
So I just wanted to make a point that it's not normal to bring that sort of thing to committee without perhaps just raising it with officers first. Thank you.
Whether we raise it with officers or not, I don't think it's appropriate for us to be debating the pros and cons of an individual care home or any other provider in public. Is that Nick
concurs with my
Patrick,
understanding, and it was the point I was trying to make. Thank you.
That's correct, Chair. If you were to talk about the individual providers, you would need to go into confidential session.
Go on, Darren.
Sorry, Chair, I know you're keen to move on, but just looking at the tenders, one of the tenders on page 29 is for a 15-year contract, so it's being extended 10 years, which is going to be way past the local government reorganisation. can I just get assurances? I think as far as it says, the extensions are totally at the council's discretion. Is there any penalty for not going ahead with the extensions? Are we going to be, if we pass this, are we going to be imposing penalties on the new unitaries? It seems a little bit strange that we're making decisions that are really going to affect the new unitaries at this point.
And you're absolutely right to be concerned. And on page 36, there's an issue about risk implications and the local government reorganisation. So I think the intention is that these contracts should take into account any subsequent, I've forgotten what the magic word is, but they're passing it on to, pardon? Novation of the contract to the new unitaries and how that would be done. So impacts may include, but not limited to, modifications such as a novation of the legal entity the provider contracts with, significant increases and or decreases in the volume of services required due to the changes in size, scope of the contracting authority, and or changes to the scope of the nature of services required. So there are arrangements built into the contracts about that. Any other comments, questions? No. Okay, so we move to the recommendation. The committee is being asked to support an extension of the existing contracts for 497 block contracted beds within care homes at a total value of £170.5 million for all contract extension periods, as detailed in paragraph 3.5. B, support decommissioning of 45 contracted block beds across 5 care homes, delivering a projected annualised saving of £1.2 million. And C, delegate authority to execute the contract extensions for the new block beds contracts starting on the 6th of December 2025 and 17th of January 2026, and subsequent extensions to the Executive Director for Adults Health and Commissioning in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of Adults and Health Committee. The full recommendations are written in the pack. Are there any objections to that, or do we take it as unanimous? I'm looking towards you, Michael.
I'd like to abstain on this one, please, Chair.
That's fine. Okay. And everybody else happy? So we're
agreed.
Well, apart from one person who's abstaining, everybody else is supporting. Thank you very much. Item 5 is the contract extensions for older persons visiting support and floating support services. And Shauna and Lisa stay with us to introduce this report. Shauna.
Thank you. This paper presents the recommended extensions to the Older Persons Visiting Support Service and the county-wide floating support service. Both services represent further examples of the Council's investment in prevention to improve outcomes for people and to enable us to better manage demand. They aim to support people to remain within their own with their own accommodation within the community through the provision of housing-related support, with this support being tailored to the different needs of different groups of people across the county. Whilst the floating support service is focused on supporting people who are experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness through support to develop the necessary skills to set up and successfully manage a new tenancy, the visiting support service aims to support older adults to remain within their own accommodation, providing them with access to community services which reduce social isolation, promote assistive technology, digital inclusion, and enable them to proactively manage any housing or financial issues, as well as preventative health measures. The outcomes of these services are currently monitored and can be seen in paragraph 3.3.2 of the report. Both services have seen an increase in referrals and do operate waiting lists, and case studies provided give examples of the impact of these services at an individual level. These services also provide a really good example of our partnership working undertaken within this area, with the floating support service jointly commissioned and accessed by Peterborough City Council, and the visiting support service either jointly commissioned or actually delivered by local district and city councils, depending on where you are in the county. Looking forward into the extended contract period, we will be working more closely with the providers to support demand management for ensuring referrals are prioritised effectively and waiting lists monitored, improve how we capture data and trends to inform future development of the service, and improve the monitoring approach to include targets set. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, questions? Anna.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is an excellent service, these visiting support service and the floating support service. But I just wanted to ask, how do they fit with the county provided community navigator service, which I think probably provides a slightly different thing, but also the community care wardens system, which is, I think, provided largely by the in combination between the district councils and Age UK and other partners. And I just wondered how they all fitted together.
So in terms of the community warden services, they tend to work together. So we try and make sure, obviously, that if someone's being supported by a community warden service, they're not also being supported by the Older People's Visiting Support Service. So that enables them to target different people to make sure that everyone's got access to the right support. Both the services are completely tenure neutral. They do also link in with the Community Navigator service, so they get referrals from that route. They can also refer people in if actually they're working with somebody who needs wider services that may not be part of their remit. So they're all quite well joined up and understand what each other do, so we can avoid duplication and make the most of the services that are out there for individuals.
Thank you. That's helpful. I just wanted to clarify, does the funding for these floating support services come from the county funding? Because there seemed to be a difference between how these services were provided in some of the districts compared to others. And I just, you know, the P3 was in Huntingdon, Fenland and East Cambs, and the partnership working with district and whatever was in South Cambs and the city. I just wondered how the funding works.
So yeah, we provide funding for all of the different services. We just have a different arrangement in City and South because we're working with a local authority partner, so we can work through a partnership agreement rather than a contract, and we can award that in a different way in terms of the actual service provision. Both of the district councils have their own housing stock, so the way that they set up that service and run that service provides us with some economies of scale in maintaining the arrangement with themselves rather than going out for an open procurement service.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Sorry, David.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I noticed that this P3 crops up quite a lot in this section. As far as I can make out, they're a charity that, yeah, I mean, they seem to be a very useful sort of charity. Can we have details of a contact there ourselves, please?
Certainly, we can make that available. Yes.
Any other comments, questions? I think we're very supportive of this work and the contract extensions which are being proposed. I'm not going to read them all out because they're rather extensive, but the recommendations are on pages 39 and top of 40. Are we comfortable with all of that? I don't see anybody voting, indicating against, so we'll accept that as carried unanimously. So item 6, thank you, Lisa and Shauna, and I hope your throat gets better quickly. So item 6 is the Adults Performance Monitoring Report for Q4 of 2024-25, which will be introduced by Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. Committee will be drawn to the paper, and I'll just give some key headlines. The performance framework builds a clear performance process, and it links individual service performances all the way through to strategic decision making for the council to embed performance at the heart of all we do. It's around outcomes and making sure that we can evidence deliver against our strategy. We track progress on a quarterly basis, and this report here is for the period ended Q4 24-25, so that's up to the end of March 31st. The most recent data has a dashboard, which is at Appendix 1, and we keep current and previous performance in there. We keep current and previous targets. We have a red, amber and green status of which we monitor against all of those targets. We also have some contextual ones which don't have a target, but as they're described, they set in context some of the performance. The direction of improvement is also shown, whether that's an increase or a decrease, and changing performance, which shows whether performance is improving or deteriorating. Just for committee's information, at 2.7, the RAG rating, which is the red, amber, green rating, shows that red is a current performance is 10% or more from target. That could be amber is a performance is off target by less than 10%, and green is a current performance is on target. Paragraph 3.1 just shows that the current status as at Q4 is that there were 2 key performance indicators at red, there were 4 at amber, and there were 6 at green. In terms of the, I'll focus on the red indicators for adults, which was the long-term support needs for adults aged 18 to 64 by admission to residential and nursing home. The performance had declined slightly when compared to the previous year's figures. We had seen some improvement in Q4, then it was against Q3, but it continued to be out against the previous year's figures. Cambridgeshire does compare favourably with statistical neighbours of England overall, despite it moving away in terms of a red measure against 2023-24's figures. And then indicator 008, a percentage of people in receipt of long-term support for more than 12 months have received a review in the last 12 months. Again, that stayed in the red. That had dipped from amber to red for the first time in Q4. However, is a new benchmarking figure for 23-24. Cambridgeshire does compare favourably with statistical neighbours, but against our target, we've seen that slip. It's a difficult balance to make between reviews and demands coming through our front door for new services, and therefore assessments and reviews are often in competing demand. But our operational management will continue to work around our review rates by teams, and that will allow our teams to concentrate on our performance in terms of use of workload and resource allocation to respond to those planned pieces of work. The one indicator which is contextual, which is 002, is the number of new clients contacts per 100,000 of population. And again, this doesn't have a target, but it's set in context. This is a rate for new client contacts per 100,000. It continues to be at a trend to a higher rate than in 23-24. A high percentage of contacts are managed through our short-term interventions through prevention and early intervention services. So what committee will realise is that whilst we have a higher proportion of people coming through our front door, the way that we approach that through a preventative and a short-term intervention approach means that we have fewer people coming through who approach us, of them moving into long-term support. And that's better outcomes for that person, and financially it's better for the council to be able to manage people in that way. It helps them around providing information, advice and guidance, and supplying them to access universal and community services. I'm happy to take any questions, but I'll offer the report to committee.
Thanks, Patrick. Any comments, questions from anybody? No. Oh, Michael.
Just a very brief question. I think I've sort of brought this up before, but I always wonder about when we say, well, it's okay because we're looking at our statistical neighbours. Because, okay, fair enough. I see the point about our statistical neighbours are like us in demographics, and the people are broadly similar. But the other thing about statistical neighbours is they tend to be county councils who vote very much the same. And our statistical neighbours have mostly been Conservative county councils. The other thing about that is that those councils that are statistical neighbours have had a historical tendency to cut council tax rather than spending on adults and health. And they have prioritised the ability to make a cut in council tax over the well-being of the vulnerable people that adult health and health look after. And so for that reason, I always feel that when we appeal to, well, it's okay because of our statistical neighbours are slightly worse than us or whatever, we are looking at statistical neighbours who have often made bad decisions that are quite harmful for vulnerable sections of our populations. And I do wonder if there's other ways we could look at it as well as statistical neighbours to get a comparison, because I think there are quite likely to be other councils that we have things to learn from and that might be performing a lot better than any of our statistical neighbours, and for reasons that are to do with the choices they make rather than simply the people that they have in their councils. But otherwise, yeah, thanks very much for the reports.
I was going to invite Patrick to comment on that, but okay, Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. So the first thing is that we do have an alternative, which is the targets that we set. And as the previous comment was made in one of the earlier papers, we often make those a stretch target, and sometimes those stretches are more challenging, which is why we're into amber and red. So I think it's important for committee to understand that's our basis for which we measure. However, we have statistical neighbours that we compare against because of the size and the nature and the demographics, which is there isn't an equal way you could say, well, we'll pick another council. If it was another council that had similar demographics and population mix, it would be a statistical comparator. So there isn't an easy council where you could go, you know, the reason that we do it is based on size, it's based on layout, and you'll appreciate that. And the reason that we use that as a reference point is that nationally, that's how many councils are measured. That's what lots of national reports that were measured. Irrespective of the political administration, it's about the way that the councils are managed and the way that the councils are seen. So we both use that in our reports as a further comparator, but also we take that learning from how it's done nationally. The other point to note is that as a region, as an ADAS region, so as a Director of Adult Social Services, I'm part of the Eastern region, and we often sit and compare our own statistics. Now, we have a mix of councils across the Eastern region. So we've got county councils in Hertfordshire, Suffolk, Norfolk, Essex, but we also have unitaries in Peterborough, in Thurrock, Southend, Luton. And we often use key performance indicators as a measure of some of our discussion about improvements and areas of best practice. But what it often boils down to is sometimes it's difficult to get a comparator against the two when I'm talking to Luton or to Peterborough, purely because, as I say, the statistical reasons are that the size of the population, the different makeup of the population, the different demands and the demographics doesn't always make a comparator an easy base to be, which is why we have statistical neighbours.
Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I don't normally bother with kind of party politics in adult committee because I don't think it's very helpful. But when someone else persists in doing it, I feel I do have to respond a little bit. So first of all, I'll just say that it's very unusual for county councils to cut council tax. They all face the same pressures, and this higher tier is very difficult to do so. So the argument tends to be on how much you raise it by rather than cutting it. And second, I've got to take issue with this idea that it's a social good to raise council tax. It's socially neutral because if you raise council tax, you give the council more money to spend, but you give local people less money to spend. And so it's a political judgment. It certainly isn't a social good, and I've really had to challenge that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I was just going to point out, as Patrick has done, that as well as the statistical neighbours, that includes the national benchmark information as well for many of the items, and that I feel is very helpful in indicating where we are compared with nationally. Okay. Any other comments, questions? No. So we've moved to the report recommendations, and we're asked to acknowledge the performance and achievements and note and comment on the proposed actions where improvements are necessary, and no vote is needed. Let's move on then to item 8, which is the Adults Health and Commissioning Directorate Risk Register, which includes public health. Patrick will introduce the report. Right, sorry, let's go back. I have just done item 6, which is the adults performance monitoring report, and we will move to the recommendation. We've been asked to note the performance information and actions arising, and no vote is required. Right. So now we move on to item 7, which is the Public Health Performance Monitoring Report for Q2 of 2024-25. Is that right? Q2? Yeah, I would have thought it's quarter 4. And Patrick will introduce the report and is joined by Sally, the Director of Public Health for Cambridgeshire. So I think we're back to where we should be. We're on the Public Health Performance Report. Thank you. Right, thank you, Sally.
Thank you. And it will be easy next time because these 2 reports will be combined. This is the last quarter of them being separate, as we were 2 separate directorates previously, but as we're now the same directorate going forward, there will be a combined report. But for now, it's a separate one. So there are just a few indicators that are in here that I'll just give the headlines on and then open to questions. So blue means that we're overachieving, green is that we're on target, and amber is that we're just off target. And then red obviously is that we're further off target, and we don't have any red, but we've got 5 amber and 2 blue, 2 green. So overall, it's a relatively positive picture. I'll just quickly mention those that are amber. And we've done a lot of work on these around trying to make them meaningful for some of our commission services. So you can really see, are we going to be making a difference through the work that we're doing to improve health in our population, rather than them being sort of high level outcome measures. So it's much more around the services that we are directly responsible for. Are they having the impact that we want them to have? So we've got a measure in there, 237 on page 82, which is around the behaviour training service and the percentage that are going into those services from deprived areas. So really trying to think about how can we make sure that the services that we're delivering are helping tackle health inequalities and working where the people need the services most for more bespoke action. So we are not far off target on that one. So we're on 31%. Sorry, the target is 30%. So we are on target for that, but I think it's amber just because we haven't always been. So over the course of the year, we haven't quite met that, but we are nearly there. Stop smoking service, we had quite a lot of conversation around this last time it came, around really needing to improve the numbers of quits that we're seeing coming through. And we are off target, but we are seeing that is getting there. So we're not doing too badly on that one. And we are doing a lot of focus work around the stop smoking service, using the smoke-free generation grant money, really trying to focus on some of those harder to reach communities, and doing some innovative work with the Alan Carr Easy Way stop smoking method, which has got good evidence base, and we've got an application in actually to evaluate that in a really robust way using some NIHR funding. So fingers crossed that we get that. Health visiting, Healthy Child Programme, we've got a few amber measures in there, but again, we are improving. So checks at 14 days, we're on 90%, but if you just take a little bit further than 14 days, we're at 96%. So we are still managing to achieve that for most of our babies, but just not quite within 14 days. But the service is really looking at those cases where they haven't and looking at a review on that and trying to improve that. And it has improved over the course of the year. Similarly for 6 to 8 week check. So if you just look at 8 weeks, then it's at 96%, but we just really need to improve those that are coming in at 6 weeks just to improve that even further. But it's a better position than it was. And the 2 and 2.5 year check is at 81%. So it's just above national, but not quite at the target that we want it to, but is again improving. And just on that one, just for context, there is, I've just received a letter recently that just from national government saying that this particular measure around the 2.5 year good level of development is going to be a real focus nationally. So I'm expecting some further scrutiny on local areas for how we can improve that early years provision there. And I don't quite know what that looks like, but I think it's really important that we get young people in the early years ready for going into school and have that good level of development. So I welcome some more focus on that from the national position. And I will open up to any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. Any comments, questions? Nick, on.
Sorry, just to flag that it was raised at the title of the report says it's quarter four for 23-24 when it's actually 24-25. That's just an error in the title on the report.
Anna, thank you. Anna.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the report. And I just wanted to ask on page 83 on the stop smoking target, which is just, obviously that's 99% of the quarterly target. So obviously that has increased over the time, but I just wondered whether the thought in my mind is it's really hard to stop smoking, and it's even harder if you've taken up smoking when you're very young. And I just wondered, to what extent is this ability to encourage people to stop smoking, is it being influenced by young people taking up vaping early on, or indeed adults taking up vaping? And I just wondered, is there any evidence that vaping is encouraging smoking in contrast to what it was intended to do, which was to stop people smoking? But just wondered if there's any information about that or any feeling about that.
I think it's still too early to say whether those young people that are taking up vaping then move on to smoke. But what I would say is that we don't want young people to start vaping because there is no reason for them to do that. It is addictive. It costs money. It's not it's not a positive behavior, and we don't know the long-term health impacts of vaping. So where we use vaping as a tool to help people stop smoking in adulthood, there's definitely evidence that it's safer and healthier than smoking and the tobacco and the nicotine that you get from smoking. But longer term, we don't know what the impacts will be for young people. So we have got, as part of our wider tobacco control work, some work with young people around vaping. And we've got other measures around tobacco control more generally, and working across the system around tobacco. But so this indicator is very much just about the numbers of quits, which is just a small part of the tobacco control work that we're doing. And there is more work around the Smoke Free Generation funding and working with homelessness and more vulnerable groups. So this is just a kind of a small snapshot of the tobacco control work that we're doing.
Clarity. I don't like to see either smoking or vaping, and I'm very glad that we're doing this stop smoking service. But what I'm wondering is if we're building any evidence that would encourage us to seek more governmental action on vaping, because I think that has its risks, as you've described, and I think we should be trying to see ways of trying to reduce vaping as well. Anyway, thank you.
So as part of the Smoke Free Generation work nationally, there is a focus on vaping as well and young people, and making it harder for young people to start vaping. But I can just take that away and think whether there is anything additional that we think from a local perspective we want to be communicating nationally on.
That'd be very helpful, Lewis.
Just on that same issue, do we keep any data on vaping locally?
We've got some data from the school survey around the proportion of young people that vape. I can't tell you what it is off the top of my head, but I can come back to you.
David and then Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just interested on the detail on the amber. I can understand, as the councillor said, no, it's very hard to get people to stop smoking because it's addictive. But health visiting, it sounds from there that we have a resource issue. And I just wanted to kind of get more detail on why we're not hitting those targets, because surely we know the people, and if we go and see them, It's more of a passive thing. So if you could just give some more detail, it'd be great.
I think historically there was a resource issue in the service on the back of some recruitment and retention issues, which they've now managed to rectify. So there was a bit of a backlog historically, which we're now managing to work through. You'll see from the data that the proportion of babies or young children that are seen for their check overall, not within the time frame, is really quite high, particularly on the 6 to 8 week checks. It's 96%, but you will never get all of them because some people just don't engage with services, but they do know who they are and they can phone and do multiple contacts. But some people are just happy to drop out of seeing services, unfortunately. But the numbers are quite high still that we're seeing. I think there's more work that we could do on the 2.5 year, which is the lowest of them, 85%. But the really important one is that 14 days, so that we know that there's all the safety measures and all the newborn blood spot screening and all of those have been done within the 14 days. So that's the one we would really want to see, making sure that is as near to 100% as possible. But the national benchmark on that one is 83%. So we're doing okay, but there's always room for improvement.
Okay, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Just anecdotally, everybody I know that has given up smoking in the last 10 years has done it by moving to vaping. And I do not know a single person, not a single one, who started vaping who then moved to smoking. Now, I'm aware that's just anecdotal, but I do still think it's significant. I wouldn't like to see scaremongering begin. Second, whilst I do support making it more difficult for young people to start any addictive substance, I do think we should keep our nose out of adults' business. In regards to things like vaping, if adults choose to vape, that's entirely their choice, just like it is to have a beer or to use caffeine. And I just don't think it's any of our business. Absolutely fine giving them information to help them make the right choices for their health according to what they believe. But beyond that, I don't like to see any interference from the state. Thank you.
Do you want to comment on that? I think the main activity is provision of information so that they can make the choice. We're not forcing them one way or t'other.
Yeah, I think the vaping work is particularly around children and young people, and the marketing of some of those bright coloured flavoured vapes and all of that work that nationally there's much more of a drive on. Vaping, we get involved with adults as a means to help them stop smoking. But I don't think we've got any particular promotional campaigns type work with vapes on adults at the moment. It's really about young people not starting to vape when it's addictive and we don't know the long-term impact.
All right, thank you very much. Go on, Anna.
Just to understand it, my understanding is that adults would only be involved with stop smoking services if they were doing it voluntarily. It's because they want to stop. That's my understanding, but I might be wrong there.
No, that's right. Correct.
Nobody's pushing anybody. It's somebody who's saying, I want to stop and I need help. So that's the only point I wanted to make to clarify that.
Yeah, that's good news. Just a point of personal clarification. It sounded like people were saying measures to stop people doing something, and I just wanted to clarify that I wouldn't support that from a council level. If we're not doing that, brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. Right, thank you very much. I think we're all in agreement there, actually. So if I'm on the right item this time, we're being asked to acknowledge the performance and achievements and note and comment on the proposed actions where appropriate improvements are necessary and no vote is required. So item 8 is the Adults Health and Commissioning Directorate Risk Register, which includes public health, and Patrick will introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So for committee's information and for awareness that there's a requirement to present risk to committee on a recommended quarterly basis, which focuses on the whole Adults Health and Commissioning Directorate. For committee's information, public health became part of the directorate, so we report as a single directorate as our risk. It has a clear and approved risk management framework that we follow. Policies and procedures are set out in identifying, assessing and mitigating risk for the council. And as a corporate perspective, the council oversees this through a corporate risk and assurance approach. Rating of risks are based upon probability and impact from a scale of 1 to 5, and then are multiplied across to gain a risk score. The council's tolerable level of risk is set at 16, and any risk that's 16 or above are then you then have to be escalated for further action. Decision is required, and they often appear on the council's corporate risk register. Just to the full risk register is reviewed regularly by the adults leadership team and is contained at Appendix 1. There are two specific risks I want to make draw committees' attention to. So risk 11 is the arrangements to support people with a learning disability resulting in poor outcomes due to uncertainty of decoupling of funding arrangements. As committee know from the 19th of June meeting that this is a particular area of concern and was a particular area of concern prior to the end of the financial year in Q4, and therefore the risk was increased to a 16 level and reported through and held on the corporate risk register due to the level of uncertainty that maintained around the future of the learning disability services and the risk that that may well have presented. I'm pleased to say that work has gone on from the continued to work, from the 1st of April. And the main reason for the decrease of risk is that the end of the Section 5 has now been managed, and those risks that we presented have been dealt with through a more mature arrangement with the ICB and giving support to those people who receive services. And therefore the risk has dropped below 16, and it now sits back on the council's Adults Health and Commissioning risk register, and it's no longer on the corporate risk register. Potentially moving in the opposite direction is risk 4, which is around relationships and governance across the integrated care system, around outcomes and population that will happen. The reason that we've reviewed this risk is that the changes that are ongoing around the ICB and their future model and future direction based around a blueprint has raised the levels of risk around that particular aspect of the work around the integrated care system. And we've got an internal process to confirm escalation to the corporate risk register, but we are hopeful with the risk and the evidence that we provided that the consideration will be given through the correct channels through the corporate leadership team, and then it will be considered through the appropriate policy committee and hopefully included into the corporate risk register. And until we are satisfied that that risk has reduced, it will remain on the corporate risk register, but it will be regularly reviewed, not just by the Adults Health and Commissioning Directorate, but also within other parts of the council who have roles to play within the integrated care system. Nothing further to add on this paper, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, questions? While you're thinking, I have two questions. One is about the reorganisation of the ICB, which we know is going to happen, but we just don't know yet exactly what is likely to happen, whether that's going to cause more problems for us. And the second is a more general thing, and I'll probably forget the answer and I'll have to ask you next time as well. But how does the corporate risk register get considered at your leadership team? So, for example, the two of the big corporate risks are lack of money and a cyber attack. How do you consider those in your leadership team?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the risk around the ICB, as the point I've just referred to, is that at the moment we've increased that level of risk through a review. We're now at a risk of 16, and therefore it's being considered by the corporate leadership team, which is chaired by the Chief Executive. And if it's supported in that process, part of the internal governance processes, that it will then go to the policy committee that will probably audit and accounts, I would think, maybe strategy and resources, but it will be considered by the appropriate committee. And then it will be hopefully supported, and it will become on the corporate risk register. It will continue to be monitored through the directorate to make sure that the risk is the right levels of risk. And if it changes, it would then be through an agreed process for approval. But at this moment in time, because of the uncertainty around the future of the ICB, the impact that will have on both the council and the integrated care system that it sits within, we feel that it's right that the risk levels are raised to that point where it becomes a corporate risk due to the potential impact it may have because of the lack of clarity on it. In terms of other corporate risks, such as cyber attack, we monitor those both through the corporate risk register and working closely with colleagues who the owners are of that, whether that be the executive director of place or of sustainability or children and families, we would work with those relevant executive director, but we will keep our own assessment of those risks, and we would reflect that in the Adult Health Commissioning Risk Register for anything that was specifically rated to those risks, even if they happen to also be on the Corporate Risk Register. So we would it would be a read across. So we would make sure that anything that places a risk on here, on our risk register, is also reflected in the Corporate Risk Register.
I can see it works that way. I was just thinking t'other way about, so cyber attack, is that's something specifically that your leadership team does consider periodically as part of consideration of your own risk register?
Thank you. Yeah, it does. So for example, the cyber risk sits main of the systems that we use, and most of those are corporate risks, are corporate systems. So ERP, which is for staffing arrangements and payment arrangements, that's a corporate risk, and therefore it sits within a corporate risk setting. Mosaic, which is our client database, that sits within a corporate risk. But what we also think around in our cyber risk is those with our connections with our providers. So when we're engaging with our providers, we do reviews to make sure that their cyber risk policies and their business continuity plans are reflected in that. And if we think that there is a specific risk around potential cyber attack on our providers or through our providers to us, we would then reflect that in here, but make sure that it's also reflected in the Corporate Risk Register. Hopefully that answers that.
Thank you. Anna.
Thank you, Chair. This is a small issue, but item 5 on the risk register is providers leave the market and are able to continue services, etc. This is on page 99. And when you go over the page onto page 100, quite a long way down the bullet list under item 1, one of the risks is wicked issues communications. Wicked issues communications. And I wondered what that was. Is that a standard term or is it a typo? Or so it's item 1 is appropriate monitoring and plans, and there's lots of bullets on page 99. And if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bullets up from the bottom of that box, there's wicked issues communications. And I thought that might be a real term, but I've never heard it.
I don't think it's a real term. I think it's probably an officer term. I think the intention here, this is under the box, this is under the heading of control. So this is about how we control and mitigate the risk. I think what the report is trying to say there is, if there are any issues that arise that has a potential risk to impact on providers, it's about how we communicate that. So we have regular dialogues through an email channel to all our providers. So for an example, the recent amber heat warnings that came out, we use that as a regular message out to providers around hydration, around caring for people, etc. And so anything that we need to get out, any critical messages that we need to get out through providers, we have a communication channel there. So I think that's what rather than it being a wicked issue, we will look at that terminology, but it wasn't a specific terminology, but it's about how we control that and how we use the communication channels we've got to help providers to manage their business, so that we in effect help them to manage their market, to have continuity of service, and around innovation, availability and capacity. It's just about that relationship that we have with the market, back to the earlier discussion on that paper.
So the reason I asked the question was I wondered if, I'm sure you're right, but I just wondered if it related to what is the word, malicious communications received by the council, but I wasn't sure.
I'm very impressed that you even picked it up. It shows how thoroughly you've read these papers. Alan.
We aim to serve.
We aim to serve, even as a sub. Excellent. Thank you very much. Any other comments, questions? No? Okay. So thank you, Patrick. We have moved to the report recommendation. The committee is asked to note the updated risk register, which we've done. No vote is required. So that brings us to the end of the public paper pack. You'll have noticed that there's nothing in it about future meetings or including the agenda and training, because we considered all those items at the last meeting. So that concludes the business for today. The committee has a reserve meeting date scheduled for Thursday, the 18th of September, and we'll confirm nearer the time whether that will be used. And we will make sure, Darren, that if we need a spokes meeting for that we will definitely have had it in advance. Any other final comments, questions? No, thank you very much. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.